In the snow-capped mountains of the moon, standing high above the rich lands of the Vale, stands the Eyrie, a storied and impregnable fortress said to have been built by the legendary Mountain Kings in the Age of Heroes. It is the stronghold of House Arryn, one of the oldest noble families in Westeros. Their sigil, a soaring falcon over a crescent moon. Their words, as high as honor. The Arryns are direct descendants of the Andal invaders, who sailed across the narrow sea and came ashore at the Fingers. According to legend, Sir Artus Arryn, known as the Winged Knight, soared through the sky atop a giant falcon, landing on the peak of the highest mountain where he defeated the Griffin King in battle. It was the Andal's first great victory over the First Men, and Sir Artus was duly rewarded. He was declared King of the Mountain and the Vale, and the region was renamed the Vale of Arryn. Thousands of years later, Aegon the Conqueror arrived in Westeros. House Arryn bent the knee to Aegon and his dragons, and were allowed to maintain the control of the region as Lords Paramount of the Vale and Wardens of the East.
The Vale of Arryn was the last of the great kingdoms left. Old and proud, House Arryn did what they always did in times of strife. They shut the bloody gate, sealing off the Vale. Then the Queen Regent Shara of House Arryn retreated with her son, the boy King Ronald, into the Eyrie, their family's impregnable fortress. From the top of their mountain they could look down on Westeros far below, its problems hidden beneath the clouds. But one day Queen Shara entered the outer courtyard to find her young son sitting on the knee of Visenya Targaryen and ogling her dragon Vhagar beside her. Just as he'd asked for another cake at dinner, little King Ronald asked his mother if he could go flying on the nice lady's dragon. Visenya smiled at Shara. So, Shara imagined, did Vhagar. Remembering her manners, Shara asked if she could have Visenya brought some wine or food. She must be tired after such a long flight. But Visenya demurred. Bored with his mother's pleasantries, Ronald demanded an answer. Poor boy. He didn't even understand the question. Shara hesitated for a moment, then asked Visenya, as a mother, if it was safe for the boy. Visenya assured her it was. What choice did Shara have? Whilst her son circled the castle, she collected his little ringlet, her own regent's coronet, and the ancient falcon crown of mountain and vale which the Arryns had worn for thousands of years. Ronald had taken to the sky as a king, but he landed as a lordling. Perhaps he considered his ancient rights a fair trade for a few minutes of flight, as a little boy would. More likely, he didn't even notice the 3 crowns at Visenya's feet, or recognize the swords of his garrison beside them.
Over the centuries, House Arryn remained loyal to the Targaryen dynasty, until Lord Jon Arryn joined with houses Baratheon and Stark in rebellion against Mad King Aerys.
No army in the 7 kingdoms can match the pride and chivalry of the Knights of the Vale. After all, they were the first true knights in Westeros. The Knights of the Vale were originally the Knights of Andalos, an eastern nation whose people invaded Westeros thousands of years ago. From the sea, the Vale seemed to the Andals an ideal new home, a wide, fertile valley isolated from the rest of Westeros and its kingdoms by a great mountain range. The first men who held it, moreover, were sparse and divided, and waded into battle with bronze axes and armor that couldn't match Andal horses and steel. But what the first men lacked in weaponry, they made up for in ferocity. Finally uniting behind King Robar Royce, the first men smashed the Andals in battle after battle, reclaiming the Vale and pushing the invaders back to the sea from whence they'd come. Learning from the first men, the remaining Andals united behind a leader of their own, not a king or a lord, but a knight who'd been born in the Vale and knew it as well as the first men. Sir Arryn, known as the Falcon Knight. The armies of the first men and the Andals met beneath the giant's lance to decide the fate of the Vale. Sir Artus had many more mounted knights than the first men, who preferred to fight on foot. But the first men had seized the high ground, digging trenches in front of their ranks and lining them with sharpened stakes smeared with offal and excrement. 6 times the Andal knights charged, and 6 times the first men threw them back. But on the 7th, a fearsome Andal warrior broke through the ranks of the first men, and the Andals rushed through the gap. If King Robar had been wiser, he would have retreated and saved his army for another day. Then again, if he'd been wise at all, he'd never have risked his army of foot soldiers against mounted knights in the first place. When King Robar saw the falcon helm of Sir Artus across the field, he wagered that the Andals would break if they lost their leader, and rode hard for the Falcon Knight. The singers paint a pretty picture of the battle. The king in flashing bronze armor, the knight in silvered steel. But the duel lasted no longer than a verse of the songs, for King Robar had taken a Valyrian sword off a dead Andal lord, and it sheared through Sir Artus' helm much like a bird's wing through the air. As the Falcon Knight tumbled to earth, King Robar thought he'd won his desperate gamble. Then he heard the trumpets behind him. When he turned, he saw 500 fresh Andal knights pouring down the giant's lance. And the man at its head was also the man at Robar's feet. For Sir Artus, unique in that age, or indeed any age, esteemed cunning even more than martial strength, and had clad one of his knights in his spare suit of armor, leaving him to die at Robar's hand, while Sir Artus took his best horsemen up a goat track he knew from childhood. The charge of the Andal knights broke the last great army of the first men, who would never again threaten the new knights of the Vale. Some of the defeated would even join their ranks in the years to come, but many more fled to the mountains, choosing savagery over submission. Ever since, the Knights of the Vale enjoyed an exclusive position in Westeros. They could sally forth from the Vale at will, knowing that if battle went against them, they could retreat through the Bloody Gate where no army could follow. Until the dragons changed the game. When Aegon the Conqueror landed in Westeros, the Queen Regent of the Vale shut the Bloody Gate against the Targaryens and massed the Knights of the Vale behind it to lock it. But Visenya simply flew her dragon to a balcony of the Eyrie where the boy king was playing, and gave the boy a ride round the castle in return for his mother's submission. With the conquest, no more could the Knights of the Vale hide behind their mountains, nor, they soon discovered, did they need to. For thousands of years, the other kingdoms had warred and treated to balance each other's might, whilst the Vale kept to itself. None realized what power the Vale could have until Jon Arryn defied the Iron Throne, refusing to surrender Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon to the Mad King. The North, the Riverlands, and the Stormlands couldn't have beaten the other 3 kingdoms by themselves, but the Knights of the Vale rode with them.
After all, the Vale's isolation does breed an abundance of honor and pious bleating, which governs their decisions instead of foresight. Like a blind man who can only guess where his horse is taking him. I doubt Jon Arryn had even prepared for civil war when he raised his banners instead of handing over his young wards, Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon, to the Mad King. Honor demanded, and Lord Arryn obeyed. He'd have done the same if the boys hadn't been the lords of 2 great houses, who could field mighty armies of their own. But perhaps I give him too little credit. After all, if the war went against them, only Lord Arryn had a nice, impregnable castle to retreat into, and he was wise enough to take poor Lysa Tully into his bed to win the Riverlands as allies. Jon Arryn won, then Jon Arryn died. Impregnable. That's how the Vale sees itself. Shielded from Westeros by its mountains.
They call the entrance to their land the Bloody Gate because, during the Age of Heroes, a dozen armies supposedly smashed themselves against it. Except the Vale has been conquered. Those vaunted mountains didn't stop the Andals who came by the Eastern Sea. The people of the Vale say that Sir Arryn, the Andal general, flew on the back of a giant falcon and slew the Griffin King on top of the tallest mountain. During Aegon's conquest, one of his sisters did the same, flying her dragon over the Bloody Gate and up to the Eyrie, the Arryn stronghold. And the Arryn boy king yielded the Vale in return for a ride on the beast.